Let me know.
Are you in a hurry, sir? Okay.
Okay, it's 7 o'clock, February 8th, 2022. This meeting is called pursuant to the provisions of the Open Public Meetings Law. This meeting of February 8th, 2022, with instructions for internet access, was included in a meeting notice sent to the Burlington County Times and the Courier Post way back on January 6, 2022, and advertised in said newspapers on January 9th, 2022, and January 12th, 2022, and respectfully posted on the website and the bulletin board in the municipal building on January 6, 2022, and has remained continuously posted as required under the statute. In addition, a copy of this notice is and has been available to the public and is on file with the office of the municipal clerk. So the first call of business would be the flag salute.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
May we have a roll call?
Mayor McLaughlin,
Here?
Mr. Levinson,
Here.
Mrs. Gilmore,
Here.
Mr. Klaus,
Here.
Mr. Montgomery.
Here.
So we just would need approval of the minutes.
Motion to approve?
Second that?
Mr. Levinson,
Yes.
Mr. Klaus,
Yes.
Mrs. Gilmore,
Yes.
Mr. Montgomery,
Yes.
Mayor McLaughlin.
Yes.
For all the minutes?
Sure. And we'd like we might as well do the executive session minutes. We'll do the special meeting. Can we do the special meeting?
Is everybody here for all of them? You can do them all at once if everybody.
Okay, yeah, we'll do the special meeting minutes of December 28th, the reorg committee minutes of January 4th, and the approval of the regular committee minutes of January 4th.
We're done.
I'd like to make a motion that all those get
Okay,
Second.
And I'll second that.
all right.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So the reports for January 2022, can we have a motion on those?
So move.
Second?
Okay. I see we have our state police officer in the audience. Matter of fact, you're our only audience tonight. We didn't roll call that. We will after that. No, yeah, can we, yeah, you can stand there. We'll do the roll call. Okay. Gotta slow down a little here.
Mrs. Gilmore,
Yes.
Mr. Klaus?
Yes.
Mr. Levinson,
Yes.
Mr. Montgomery,
Yes.
Mayor McLaughlin.
Yep, the crowd is making me nervous. I apologize. Okay, officer, how are you?
Good. How's everybody tonight?
Very
Hey.
good. Thank
See
you.
you.
Nice to see everybody. Nothing major to report. Businesses are still getting hit with the catalytic converters. Detectives are working diligently to try to identify with other municipalities, to identify suspects. Just a reminder to residents, just keep an eye out for any suspicious activity in neighborhoods. Apparently, we had a report of a theft of copper from a house that was, I guess, being sold, so it was empty at the time.
Wow.
So somebody must have went in there and stole the copper. That individual from last summer that was going around in neighborhoods talking to young females, he's back out there. So if anybody has any contact with him, he's acting suspiciously, please give us a call.
Is there any ID on this person? Any description whatsoever?
Yeah, the last description we had, he was wearing dark shaggy clothing, hoodie covering his face. He's a young guy, apparently. He's must have some issues. We've locked him up already.
Oh, so you know who he is?
Yeah, we know who he is,
Okay.
so. But if anybody has any, in town, they see him, I guess he urinated on somebody's lawn, but there was nothing on camera, so we couldn't do anything about that. And
Does he live in town, or does he?
I
Is he
believe.
homeless?
I
or-
believe he lives in town,
Okay.
so. But we're aware of him, but if any residents have any issues, give us a call so we can come out there and take care of it. And just a reminder to please lock your cars and secure any valuables, such as purses, laptops, out of view. Anyone sees any suspicious individuals walking around looking into cars, give us a call. And as always, if there are any issues in town, non-emergent, they can always contact Paula, and she'll relay that information back to me. And that's all I have for tonight.
Okay, thank you very much.
Great.
All right.
All right, thank you.
Officer.
We might need you to
Stay
stay in
safe.
guard here.
Yeah, there's a crowd, the
Tonight-
crowd's getting
A little
rowdy.
out of control.
Crowd control.
All right, thank you. So, we made the motions and voted on the reports, right, everybody? Okay. So, for the discussion and presentation, I'm going to basically turn the meeting over to Jerry and Ken, who did a lot of work on this cannabis thing. So if you guys would like to pair off and explain to the committee and the audience and the people online
Well-
what we're doing here, what your recommendations are and what we're going to vote on.
Well,
Don't mind.
I can start on why we not recommend the retail, because it's a cash business, and we think it's too much of a risk having a cash business in town. And since we were kind of like 50-50 about it, that was the deciding factor, basically for both of us, because of the level of cash involved and how it could create a crime issue that could be
Just
not-
extra
it's
added.
crazy. It's just a fact. It's not good. But
And the thought was that, let's just see what happens elsewhere. Let's see what happens. Again, it's a cash business because they can't have credit cards, the banks can't get involved, so there's a variety of different things, so it's, so it just makes it much more difficult. And among other things, that, goes on and on. So we just felt, let's just check it out, see what the other towns do, how things work out. We can always get back in if we choose to. But the wholesaler and the distributor side, we're well prepared for that. The cultivator and the manufacturers, and we've discussed them before already, it's just the space, the smell.
The environmental
light.
impact
The
is
environmental impact
terrible.
was just something we, again, since it's new to the state and new to all of us, we felt best to put a hold on that and see how those things work out at this point. So the subcommittee made their recommendations, and then Jerry and I looked at those and discussed those and, further, and that's why we're suggesting with the wholesale and the distributor. It's 1% tax that we can add for the wholesale
Right.
on top of that.
and distributor, right? I
Yeah,
think it's
the distributor, we cannot tax, right?
Correct.
Correct.
Okay. One of the things I've read is other towns, they're allowing a Class 6 delivery.
Yes.
You can't prevent that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how you even discuss
you
that.
can't prevent it.
You can't prevent somebody from delivering in your town. So it's kind of like you don't have to allow for it. We just, somebody's going to deliver your town no matter you allow for it or not.
I could provide a little clarification. Again, Scott Mickio, John Gillespie's associate at Parker McKay. I pitched in with the ordinance here today. So with regards to the delivery, the Class 6 delivery, of course, yes, it's true that you have to allow delivery to come into the town from other delivery services, but if you allow the actual license in the town, that means that they're allowed to establish themselves and essentially set up shop in town. So that's what that means. That's a
Yeah.
separate license class.
Right.
Not connected to a retailer, separate and apart
Right.
from that. So, yeah, just want to,
Yeah, and we had talked about that before, just the fact that we kind of lumped that in with the retail, and having all that, that we just decided to push that aside for the moment and focus on the wholesale and distributor, so, yeah. So thank you for clarifying.
Sure.
Thank you for being here, too.
Absolutely.
And your help with us in the committee as well. You weren't here when we were thanking people otherwise, so.
My pleasure.
Appreciate it.
So we do have an ordinance tonight for that, and we'll get in a little more discussion once that ordinance comes up. The second item for discussion is our sidewalk repair project. So we are prepared to move forward with, I guess, in our survey, was that the worst part of town?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So, again, the audience isn't here.
Well, you have.
They were certainly here a few months ago
Right.
about
You do
this
have three-
issue.
You do have 3 people online.
Okay,
You do have not-
so we're taking another bite at the apple here on this. I'm happy to have worked with Paul a little bit on this, or a lot. Paul did all the work, actually. And we are prepared to move forward with getting some of the sidewalks fixed before the, it's pretty quickly, actually. So, I guess I'll say a little more about the sidewalks once the ordinance comes up. But that's pretty much it. We're pretty ready to move forward on the worst of the sidewalks, which again is Craig Drive, Sandra Lane, and what's that other?
Laurel Ridge.
Laurel Ridge.
Right.
So those are been duly noted as the worst in town so far. So like the roads, we go, year by year, and we'll go through town like we do with the roads and get these sidewalks fixed. Does anybody want to talk
Yeah,
about the
Mayor,
sidewalk project?
Just a quick thing is that, and again, this is just to reiterate, just to expand a little bit more, this was a study that the township did all around town to look at these sidewalks, to evaluate and determine where it was the worst case. And this is, so, once we did all that, this is the outcome of that. And then we'll evaluate further as we go, but,
I've just taken the attitude that, in my opinion, one man's opinion, I think it was a little bit of a planning issue that caused some of those sidewalks to raise up with planting those large trees. So, I felt the town had a little bit of a moral responsibility, maybe not legal responsibility, but certainly a moral responsibility to fix those. And again, we'll talk about an ordinance at a later date, but we'll at least get that part done, and we'll move forward. Anybody else want to talk about it? Any questions?
yeah. Just the further thing is that, and I was involved in a little bit of the discussion back and forth, and part of the platform when I ran, and I'm going to say Bruce Levinson ran with me, we both agreed with this, that we wanted the township to look at this in these particular areas, and I was on that street that is included here, and one of the gentlemen pointed out I was there, and that was certainly one of the issues. And because it was done a long time ago, we had wanted the township to at least evaluate that and take care of that, and we're happy that we were able to do this. Bruce, and we talked about that in our platform, yeah, so.
Okay, so we have now comments from the public on agenda items only.
Can I say something?
You certainly can.
Hello?
Yes. Name and address for the record.
It's me, Anna Evans.
Yep.
63 Perry Drive.
We all know, but
Sorry I can't be with you in person tonight. I just wanted to say that I wholeheartedly approve of the ordinance to use township money to fix those sidewalks. Thank you for fulfilling your campaign promises, Mr. Montgomery and Ms. Levinson. I just wanted to clarify, is that money only going to cover the roads that the mayor mentioned? And is there likely to be another appropriation? Because although those are the worst areas, they're not the only areas. Are they the only ones that the township feels a moral obligation to fix? Or is it likely
Well,
that there's going to be other open transfers to
Yeah.
fix the other areas?
Right, so, as I stated, I felt that that doesn't mean the town feels they have the moral obligation, but I just felt strongly about it, especially personally seeing everybody using it, because I happen to live over that way. I see it more and more. But again, Paul, we've gone through the town. The administrator can maybe talk about that.
Sure.
And how we plan to possibly handle the other remaining areas.
Sure. So first, the ordinance that's on the agenda tonight for first reading is to appropriate funds out of the general capital, which actually is a culmination of canceled projects. So that money's actually been sitting there, so this is a great project for that particular line item. But the appropriation is for $80,000, and based on the estimates that I've received to do the repair work, it's going to be significantly less than that, but the CFO and I decided, let's go ahead and appropriate $80,000 for sidewalk repairs, so that we know that we have a few other areas that were high on the list, specifically in Claremont. Those were the other identified sidewalks, at least the municipally owned sidewalks, that we will be looking at and making a recommendation to do next. Don't know when that will be, but the top three most egregious, highest exposure sidewalks are those three. So yeah, the intent here is to have funds appropriated tonight for future sidewalk projects. But believe it or not, based on the evaluation, about 85% of Hainesport sidewalks are in very good condition. And there's a significant part of Hainesport that does not have sidewalks.
That don't have sidewalks.
There are a lot of communities in Hainesport that do not have sidewalks. The Heights, the Proper,
So
all of our rural roads. So.
I just want to add something to the discussion. The intent here is to repair sidewalks that have lifted due to tree roots, basically the trees that have been planted in between the sidewalk, if you will, and the right-of-way, and, the roots. It was not and is not intended to fix general cracks, in the sidewalks, which I think our ordinance is going to wind up addressing that. So I don't want anybody to expect, because I haven't walked, and I don't know if our contractor walked, the estimator did walk the whole thing, but again, this is primarily for tree root lifted sidewalks. So if somebody has a little crack, I don't think we're necessarily gonna fix a crack unless it's a dangerous, with a totally unlevel type crack.
Right.
So,
And these were the trees that, it's one thing to plant probably shouldn't plant trees there, right, as we've all learned between the sidewalk and the street, but, planting a pear tree is one thing, but planting a mighty oak or a maple tree, just not a good idea. So, after many, many years, it's destroyed that, so.
and, early on, we don't do that anymore, right, Scott? We just don't do that anymore. We,
Try to pick the right tree for the right.
yeah, we
That
learned
was
that.
before Scott's time.
Yeah, we
obviously.
learned that a long time ago. I think it was one of
Yeah.
my first or second planning board meetings. I didn't come up with it, but the planning board did. They came up with that's a no-no, not to do that. Okay, anybody else with a comment? No takers? We'll end the public comment section and move into ordinances. So I read through this ordinance. It's pretty complicated. I like the audience and the public to kind of know what we're doing. I suggest maybe they get a copy of it if they're really interested and read it, but it's quite a few pages. Can our expert attorney, maybe explain it a little bit?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So I guess we'll go back to the beginning briefly. In November 2020, the state of New Jersey legalized the recreational use of cannabis, and at the time it said by August, every municipality in the state had to either opt in or opt out of the 6 license classes that were being offered. Those being cultivation, manufacturing, wholesale, distribution, retail, and delivery service. So in August, the Cannabis Regulatory Commission's regulations had yet to be released, so the township at the time made the prudent decision to say, okay, we're going to opt out for now, and we want to investigate this further and revisit it later on. So that's, it's since been revisited. A cannabis subcommittee was created and made recommendations that the township should considering allowing cannabis wholesaling and distribution. So wholesaling and distribution are pretty much what you would think they would be. Wholesaling is sort of the warehousing and storage of cannabis, and distribution is the transport of cannabis in bulk to retail establishments. So the ordinance is divided up into, I'll say, 2 main sections, and perhaps there's one more element to this still to come, and Mr. Taylor will address that as well. So it's split up into the licensing section and the taxation section. So in the licensing section, there's a few different elements. So one is if a potential wholesaler or distributor wants to locate itself in Hainesport, it needs to first, as part of its state application, it needs to receive a resolution of local support. So in section 77-7, we set forth what's required for that. That includes, you need to submit a concept plan to the township. You would have to appear before the Township Economic Development Committee, which would then make a recommendation to this committee on whether or not to send that resolution of support to the state for state licensure. So section 77-8 explains the requirements for local licensure, which is different than the resolution of local support that's required for the state license. So this sets forth a separate local license requirement. So to obtain that local license, after the applicant has received the approval of the state, the applicant would have to obtain the necessary land use approvals, which may or may not involve going before the land use board, and pay any necessary fees. So this ordinance requires a $5,000 application fee and a $5,000 annual registration fee for all cannabis wholesalers and distributors. The ordinance goes on to touch on really important elements of the cannabis business, such as security, site management, odor control, and storage. So the requirements, all these requirements are set forth, like I said, in the licensing section. So these are elements that you can't get a variance from. This is a necessary prerequisite to be able to obtain the license in Hainesport and to continue to obtain that on a yearly basis. There's an enforcement provision that's built in, and like I said, the second section of this is the taxation provision. So for cannabis wholesalers, the state has said that the municipality can tax up to 1% of sales, and for distribution, there's no municipal tax allowed, which I suppose makes sense. You know, there's no sale per se that's taking place. It's just simply the distributor is driving the cannabis in bulk from the wholesaler to the retailer. So that's, I'd be happy to entertain any specific questions. That's sort of how we broke down the ordinance. And I guess, Scott, it would be helpful to kind of talk about next steps and the land use element of this.
Thank you, Scott. Good evening, committee members. I apologize for my tardiness. As we went through the cannabis subcommittee meetings, there were a handful of discussions, as committeeman mentioned before. Let's hit the pause button on cultivation, manufacturing, retail, and delivery. there are much more complex land use issues associated with those, from lighting, wastewater, odor, et cetera. When we boiled it back to the Class 3 and Class 4, we started to have discussions that the four main things that we really want to address, because if we have a warehouse facility, you can take one of the new ones in town, one that's existing, there are pallets of things inside those that we're not sure what they are unless they're hazardous, and then they, under the building or fire subcode, the town has to understand what they are. But there could be pharmaceuticals in there. There could be Oxycontin in those. There could be vodka in those. Does it matter if we have a pallet of cannabis or vodka or something else from a land use standpoint in terms of the impacts on the community and outside? So when we went through the process, we really wanted, the subcommittee wanted to focus on security, to make sure that the trash was secured, to make sure that there were no offensive odors emitted from the site, which some of the distribution can, and to make sure that everything that was happening on these sites was happening inside. So as we started to get into the further discussions with Scott and John and Paula, we started to realize, and I think that the legislation gives kind of broad latitude for the municipality to regulate things under the licensing component. And the more we looked at it, as much as I, as a planner, like to overly complicate things from a land use standpoint,
It's true.
Somebody had to say something.
that was a lob, John. When we looked at this, I said, can we handle all of these under the licensing component to take the site plan and land use requirement out of it? And we all sort of agreed and said, yeah, we can handle all of those, and all of those elements are actually included in this licensing agreement, because there is a requirement for a concept plan. We're addressing odor and security and everything having to happen inside. So when we look at that, and from an economic development standpoint, if somebody doesn't have to come for site plan approval just to say, we're gonna be storing pallets of cannabis, where anybody could store a pallet of anything else in that same warehouse, it saves somebody time, it saves them the time and aggravation of having to go to the Joint Land Use Board for an approval. So we thought that enough regulation was in place to get all of the protections that the subcommittee wanted through this licensing document. So unless that facility would otherwise need site plan approval, the fact that they happen to be wholesaling cannabis would not, in and of itself, trigger the requirement for a site plan application or approval. How we're gonna handle this was, the other good thing about it is, we can simply put this in the definitions under wholesale or distribution / trucking facilities, which our ordinances are not real strong with our definitions now. We'll define those, and we'll have a subsection in the definition to say, this includes a cannabis wholesaler, and then basically regurgitate the definition from Scott's licensing ordinance here. What that does is, it saves us a handful of steps. We can just amend the definition section of the ordinance. If we did this as a conditional use, we would have to then modify each and every one of the industrial zones and each and every one of the redevelopment plans that allow industrial uses. So while I'm talking myself out of a lot of work, the time, cost, and energy for legal and planning work could potentially be in the fives of thousands of dollars or tens, which really doesn't seem necessary because Scott's ordinance is so good, he's got it all covered.
Here, here.
And Scott, that's part of the master plan reexamination, right?
We are. So as you all know, that is being addressed now. And so we're going to include that recommendation, those definitions within the re-exam. That way, there's no question when that gets referred to the Joint Land Use Board for master plan consistency, it's in our brand-new reexamination report, and that should be seamless.
Well, thank you. Those descriptions actually do slight justice to the amount of work that took place in arriving at this ordinance. There's certainly a lot more than that, but you put it in as good a perspective as we have time for tonight, because we got to get out of here by 11. You know?
If I could just clarify one of the things in the memo. So I think I said in the memo that the application process for wholesalers and distributors opens up on March 15th, which is right around the corner. And that was one of the other, one of the other reasons we wanted to kind of bifurcate the process here was we've got, Hainesport has an ordinance in place. We're open for business, tell the world that that's the case. But the Cannabis Regulatory Commission's website says that I thought that wholesalers and distributors would also, the applications would open up on March 15th. That's what I was told from numerous sources, but the website doesn't say that. I placed calls into the Regulatory Commission to try to confirm because they don't have dates for opening up the applications for wholesalers and distributors. So I don't think it's March 15th. I think it's actually going to be later, so perhaps in April or even in May. You may have heard that this process is going a lot slower than perhaps a lot of people in the state would like. I don't know if any of us are surprised, but that's kind of how this rollout has gone. So it
Because we were originally told, in the many seminars in which I participated,
Yeah.
first quarter, they wanted to do that, so that was actually right on target, so. So you think it's going to be probably April or May then?
Yeah, I mean, and the website explicitly says retailers start applying on March 15th, still silent on wholesalers, distributors, and delivery services.
Well, how are they going to get there?
Yeah, who's going to supply it?
Yeah, it seems like the best thing to do would have gone, the process from cultivation down to retail. They're not doing it that way. They don't have regulations. I gather that additional regulations are actually still forthcoming for wholesalers and distributors. I don't think it's anything that would affect our ordinance, and of course, if it does,
Right.
we could certainly amend it at the time.
So can we say as soon as the state allows it? Is that, or do we need to be more definitive with that? Do we need to wait until they come out with it and then amend it, or?
I think the way to proceed would be, because of course you won't have any wholesalers or distributors here until they get that state application.
Absolutely.
Because that local
Right.
approval is part and parcel with that state process. So if for some reason there's a regulation that is, directly contrary to something we have in our ordinance, and it's hard to come up with something that actually would be, but if it were, I think we would be able to make quick work of it and just, amend the ordinance at that time. The benefit of this, like I said, is, okay, we have this in place. We're going to have the land use element part of it that comes a little bit later. So we'll be ready to go once that application process does open up.
Anybody have any other questions?
I do. Hey, Scott, you guys did a great job on streamlining this whole thing, so I give you kudos there.
Thanks.
With regard to the distribution and the wholesaling you can charge or basically get a tax percentage of 2%, correct?
1%.
Oh, 1%,
Yeah.
okay, very good. I thought I saw 2% somewhere. Let me see what else here. Now, the fees, it's a $5,000 application fee. Is that negotiable? I mean, can we go up with that or down with that? What's the going rate? What's the
So,
market gonna?
based on my observations of other municipalities, I believe that's the going rate, maybe towards the lower middle part of that going rate. The state's guidance has been that it has to be reasonable, and with all fees that the municipality charges, it has to be commensurate with the amount of work that's going into it, which is kind of difficult to figure out right now because, as far as the registration and the application fees go, there's planning board review that goes into it. Perhaps there's some state police, security elements to it as well. So it's kind of hard to predict, I guess, how much it's going to cost the township to incorporate cannabis at this time. So there's no specific number that's set by the state. There's, I know in one town up in North Jersey, they're charging $30,000 for both the application and registration fee. That seems exorbitant to me. But there is no set number. And, obviously on the other end of it, you could have a municipality that's charging nothing because they really want to make sure to attract these businesses, and that can kind of be a carrot for them. But I would say I'd say it's certainly reasonable, the $5,000 figure, and I think it's right there somewhere in the middle of what other municipalities have done.
So would all of the I mean, I know I was a used car dealer at one time, fingerprinted, background checks, the whole 9 yards. Never had a liquor store, but I'm sure it's not much different for liquor sales. Who will bear the responsibility and the onus to do all these background checking and all that good stuff?
Yeah, the state application process is pretty extensive, so.
So the state will supervise the background checking of basically all applicants for all different types of licenses?
That's right.
So also, I see, would the Township Committee prefer that all applicants be required to appear before the Township Committee? I think what you're saying at this point in time, that you don't necessarily need to appear before the Joint Land Use Board necessarily, given the construct that you've put together. However, what are the benefits versus negatives of having them appear in front of the Township Committee, each applicant?
So the way the ordinance is drafted now is that they will appear before the Economic Development Committee. They'll consider the presentation, the application, and then that committee would make a recommendation to this committee on whether or not to issue that resolution of local support, which is part of the state application process. So if the Township Committee so desired, that could be amended to require that, you know, if you wanted applicants to come here and present to you, we could do that as well. But the way the ordinance is written right now is to go to the Economic Development Committee to make the recommendation to you folks.
So benefits versus negatives of having to appear before us, is that just an added extra step that we don't necessarily have to go through, or?
I think that, you know, I think the Economic Development Committee, I think the thought process was they were well-positioned, you know, this is kind of what their task is.
Okay.
So this would be, you know, they might be the right forum for applicants to go in and present to. You know, it would be, to a certain extent, time-consuming. You know, it's hard to say how many of these are going to be applying in the township, but to a certain extent, it would be time-consuming to have them to come in and present to this group. So I think to streamline, it was actually, I think the thought process was to streamline the process. We have them go there, and then have them make the recommendation to you.
So
Thank you.
So the Economic Development Committee meets with a potential applicant. How would the Economic Development Committee vet that candidate?
If I can answer that.
Would we require a background check? Are we able to?
No, they've already been vetted by the state at that point. They've already gone through a background process.
So they
And I
don't
can-
come to us until they filled out the state application?
Until they've been accepted by the state and gone through their licensure with the state, correct?
This would be part and parcel with their state
So it's
application.
running parallel paths.
Yeah.
But I can tell you, other municipalities have created scorecards to help whatever entity is doing the review of these businesses. And I've actually started collecting some from other municipalities, and that's a tool that can be used to help you grade or score these various applicants. No different than an employee evaluation using the same criteria, or sidewalk assessments, or,
So are the state police the background checking authority on this? John?
at the state
Guys?
level, but there is going to be, just like with ABC and our raffle licensing, the state police has to sign off. There's an opportunity for them to just review and sign off on maybe their security plan, I think it is. It's the security
Bruce,
plan.
I could see your point, but I'm thinking the Economic Development Committee, to possibly avoid some embarrassment, public embarrassment of presenting the committee with an unqualified or unsuitable applicant, which hopefully that applicant would never clear the Economic Development Committee and be out in a public setting. But I'm just trying to figure out how we do that, how we would do that.
Well, knowing that.
I'm
they-
sure it'll work out, but I'm just,
Yeah, it's
No,
kind of
that
this,
they've
in my
already-
mind, it was, when we discussed it, was the same process that you go through now when you vet potential businesses that want to come into town, and They have an informal meeting.
Business license or a
But
liquor
then,
license.
you know, you can also set up a secondary
Well-
meeting with a little bit more of a robust group, some different,
I mean, you can, I mean, we have it, you can, when I had a used car license, first you have to get the clerk to sign off that the area that you have intended is zoned, but the rest is up to the state. You know, you're not gonna, if you don't pass all the background checks, and of course you get fingerprinted and all that good stuff.
I have to, so for the ABC licensing and even the raffle licensing, we have a checklist of items that we have to ensure that the applicants provided to us, and we attest to the state that those have been fulfilled, those requirements have been fulfilled, and we're vetting it when it goes up to the state for their ultimate approval, whatever department that is.
So the state license would be a prerequisite to having the applicant's name submitted to the committee? That
I
he
think
would
at a
need to have
minimum,
that
they have
first?
They need to let
They
us
had to have-
record.
The township has to
From us.
support the
We
applicant
could
to
be-
apply.
it could be
Right.
support.
They would tell the state, if I understand it, they would say, oh, Hainsport's opening, I'd like to go there, and then the state would forward it to us. Isn't that part of it?
It is, but even before that, like, when they send their application in, they need to have that resolution of local support from the township as part of their application. And then the state will vet it, and I gather, and this hasn't actually happened yet for
Right.
even the cultivators and manufacturers, so we'll see how it plays out. But I gather that the state will review it, they'll note that you've recommended them, then there'll be an additional step, they'll send it back to the municipality to confirm essentially that, they comply with your ordinance, whatever, local regulations you put in place, and then at that point, I think,
How do we know who we're supporting? How do we know who they are?
We could support them based on their passing the state background checks, basically like that. But do they meet with economic development and then they recommend them to meet with township committee? Or
Yeah, the committee has to,
the committee has to vet them?
Pass.
So basically,
Of
economic
support.
development,
Well,
we don't
There's
know
a
who it is.
pre-screening.
We don't know who they are.
they do
don't-
a
Yeah,
pre-screening.
the
that's not what you're saying,
resolution.
is it, Scott? You're not saying that, you're saying that the applicant would meet with the economic development, and then the economic development would come to the committee and say, this is what we think.
Right.
The applicant wouldn't be in front of the committee, in front of everybody.
And you
That-
would-
Isn't that what you're?
That's how the
suggesting?
ordinance is currently
Unless the
written.
Right.
committee- Unless the committee wanted to do that. I mean, the committee always reserves the right to say, okay, we appreciate the recommendation, but we would like a presentation, we want to know who we're licensing.
I'm wondering, just because it's new, again, I don't want to give us more work, and I don't want to over-govern, right? I mean, this, what you said before, Scott, I thought was perfect. You were talking about doing these different things, it's just over-governance. I don't think we need to do that, but I'm just concerned, just because it's new, whether we go through the process with the Economic Development Committee, and if they say, hey, we think this applicant's good, present it, then I'm wondering if it makes sense
We
for
don't
us.
do
Does
that with liquor licenses.
I don't know.
No.
Just, let me just give you, throw a
Yeah.
different perspective. So we don't do that when we have a transfer of a liquor license.
Yeah, but they do it. The state's doing it.
No, the
Correct.
state's going to do this too.
But we've had several different transfers of liquor licenses, whether they've been consumption or distribution. We don't have them come before the governing body to be vetted. Like, as a group, you pass it by resolution, you authorize them by
We get a list.
resolution.
We get a list of names, and I got you.
But the
this is a
transfers
little
are,
different.
their own separate resolutions.
All right. Well, we'll have to
There's
take it.
no background check prior to us giving
Yeah.
Right.
the letter of support.
We can only support them based on
Correct.
the
But
information
is
we
that-
have.
Right, but your resolution, your support is really, and that's in the law, is based on, do they comply with your zoning ordinance, and any other elements of, zoning regulations and any other elements of the ordinance? And, I'll note that we have built into the ordinance that they're gonna be, because one of the things we want to avoid is being arbitrary and capricious. We don't wanna support one business over another because somebody knows someone else's brother. We want to avoid all that at all costs. And I'm not saying that anyone here would do that, but one of the reasons that we've built that in is to avoid all of that. First come, first serve. We'll consider your application, and if it's a checklist. Are you able to meet all of the provisions of our ordinance? Yes. You're in a zone where we're permitting this. That's where your proposed location is. Yes. Then we will, we'll make that recommendation to the state that we support your application.
Then they get background check and everything else, and then the
Yes.
state would come back and say, well, you might like him, but he's really not suited for a license, so
Right.
therefore, that's the end.
Yeah,
of
they
it.
just won't get
They won't
awarded the
get the
state license,
license.
and of course, they'll have no opportunity to come to Hainesport. You know, that, you have to have the state license,
Right.
first and foremost.
So, you know, and just, okay, so in the state's infinite wisdom, they're gonna be the ultimate,
Yes.
grantor, and we'll just be step 1 or 2 of the process.
And the final decision, actually.
After-
We're allowing them to be.
But after all the data comes back, right? From the state.
Can I,
Because we couldn't deny them once
Well-
the data came back.
well, that's what I want to go to, right? So
Okay.
I'd like you to look at the top of page 6,
This is very complicated.
on C. It says a license to operate shall be granted if 4 things are satisfied. So it's mandatory, right? Takes away your discretion. Why couldn't it read, a license to operate shall be considered for approval by the Township Committee when you do those things? I mean, unless there's something in the statute that I'm not aware of, which could easily be the case because I'm not that familiar with it, but that's why we have Scott. I just don't like the idea where governing bodies don't have discretion. Right, so is there anything in the statute that would preclude this ordinance from saying a license to operate shall be considered for approval by the Township Committee if they meet the check boxes?
Well, for one thing, there is a distinction between that initial recommendation to the state. So that's in section 77-7, the
Right.
previous section on page 5,
Right.
which is really when the township is weighing in on this. Is there anything precluding any sort of further analysis by the township in the legislation? No. Like Paula said, there's certain, you know, one way to do it is you could have a more robust checklist scoring system, I guess, for all the potential applicants that come in. And either this committee or the Economic Development Committee could you know, analyze the application and score them out and kind of see where they land and make their recommendation based on that. And that's certainly something that the municipality could develop as well.
I mean,
Does say-
I don't know why my mind keeps, one side of me keeps saying the word criminal in my ear, you know. And I'm not necessarily, don't want to tie a potential business person who wants to go into the business, but I certainly don't want a criminal
But that's the
going into the
background check.
business.
But that's the background.
Right,
check
but
part.
That's the state's job to find out.
and you say the state,
Like, if somebody comes
Yeah,
before us
no,
and they have ties to organized crime,
but I.
and they go to a meeting, we're not gonna know that. And they come before us, we're not gonna know that. So the next step, they go through a background check, and they find it. Well, could it be embarrassing for us if we approve somebody that had ties with organized crime? Sure, but we don't have access to that background check.
That kind of
Is that right?
answered my own question.
Correct.
So
Right.
really, it's not our responsibility to know if they are a criminal or they have ties to organized crime. It's more to find out what kind of business they're going to run, how they're going to run it, or do we think they're going to be cooperative within the hours of the business? You know, are they going to be disruptive to our town? Those type of things we got to look at. We can't look at their background and find out whether their uncle was a hitman or some, you know. I
Maybe
mean,
not, maybe we can, but Leila, you were saying something? About
Well-
marijuana's
Leila was saying something about it? You were-
Well, I was asking, but it does say in that 77-7C, it says the resolution of local support does not constitute final approval for the local
Right.
licensor and shall only be granted as set forth in 77-8. So that kind of answered
Right.
my original question.
And listen,
We do have an
a
out.
lot of people think the state's dopey. I think they're gonna do a pretty good job at this, that's, you know, of organizing this whole business and, of course, the taxation and of it, so, okay, I get it. So it's just gotta kinda throw the questions out there, but the process will
It's just so
take care of itself, I
Much.
guess.
So,
Yeah.
so let me understand, Scott. So what it is that they would first come to the Economic Development Committee, and then they would make a recommendation to the township, and then we'd say, yes, no, maybe so. We say yes, then it goes back to the state, then it comes back to the Economic Development Committee. They do it again, and then they make a recommendation again to the committee. Is that?
I don't think
So
we.
it's twice?
I think it comes
Is that?
We don't have the second meeting with the Economic Development Committee built in. Essentially, it's just, the licensing part of it is, once the state has said, okay, we approve your application, so as long as the municipality is okay with it, then we're okay with it. And that's where, like John was mentioning, 77.8-C comes into play.
Shall be
So-
considered by the, right. I like that.
So that would come.
I don't really like that. Let me
don't,
tell you
really?
why. Because here you're going to go through, you're investing all this money to meet the requirements of the town, and then you go through this stringent background test with the state, and you do everything you're supposed to do, and all of a sudden you go back, and then the town says, we changed our mind. I just, that one I have
Well,
a
there
problem
has to
with.
be just cause.
No, no,
Well,
Yeah.
my point
no,
is,
no. The onus is on-
Just cause. No.
yeah, see, that one I
It
got
doesn't
to.
say just cause.
Then how many people would consider coming here and opening the business
Well-
if we could, after they go through the whole process, just say, no.
But Jerry, and I hear what you're saying, but if you're the onus has to be on the applicant to be reasonably sure that he qualifies, to do what he's trying to do as far as, meeting any state and local ordinances. It's just like anybody trying to build. I mean, they could hire Scott and say they want to put the Empire State Building over there on Revicchio's property and spend all the money they want. And Scott could come in here with an Empire State Building and say, hey, guess what? You can't do it. I mean, you gotta know what
I agree,
you're.
but there's got to
what
be
you're
a process
doing,
that's orderly when you go through this part. I mean, I've gotten several state licenses. There's a process that's orderly.
Oh, yeah.
If you get to the final stage and you say yes, and then they say, oh, wait a minute, you can go all the way back here, we're going to say no.
But it would probably.
I'm just concerned about
Yeah, I
the
hear you.
applicant's expense.
But how would it come to us, in a resolution? Just right here, licenses as a resolution?
It would be a resolution
Granting.
that
Just
applicant the
like-
right to
Okay.
conduct its business in Hainesport. But I do have a question. Would we have collected the application fee at the beginning of this process, or, so my question is, I know that some of these applicants in the beginning were thinking, well, let's just get approval from every municipality that we think would be a viable location and get these letters of support, and then it's up, you know what I mean, then they're just gonna go to whatever town that they really, at the end of the day, wanna operate in, or it could be multiple towns. Are we collecting the fee first before we meet with the economic development? What's to say that they're not
Well, the application fee, yeah, that would be paid when the application is made to the state, and they've said they want to locate here in Hainesport, and they're asking you to consider them for a resolution of local support. They'll pay the application fee, and it's non-refundable, and, just like, for land use approval, sometimes they don't go through. You paid escrow, you paid your application fees, you don't get those back.
So that
Because
would
I think
reduce-
that
I don't have a problem with that.
Non-refundable.
I don't have a problem with that.
Because I think
Okay,
that
just-
concept
I'm-
plan.
I don't think we're gonna do
I
that.
just wanna make sure that we're not gonna have an influx of
They meet
people who wanna just come in
That's what I'm
and
saying. This is-
see if they can do business here, and
They
we
meet
wind
our
up with
requirement,
50.
And we're approving them.
But
based
obviously,
on
that's not gonna happen if we're gonna,
Meeting the state's
they're gonna have to pay
requirement.
that fee ahead of time, and
they're gonna have a-
that's gonna be just serious,
I know,
serious
that's the
businesses.
state's responsibility.
Sure, and generally
The applicant's
speaking,
gonna
the
have
applicant has to have its
They
location
need to
picked
look
out as
through
part
it.
of its
Yeah,
state
yeah, yeah,
application.
yeah.
Yeah, well, that's.
It has to know where it's going
We
to
are
look.
limited. They're-
And I think that's why
Making a
we
state
need
license.
it first.
If we don't, plus they're gonna have to have an agreement of where it's gonna be at. There's,
Yeah.
right?
So-
They're gonna have to have an agreement of where it's
So,
gonna be at.
yeah, there's some
so.
consternation of, on crisscrossing the license application, but I'm sure there's a state application that's pretty clear as to what you need to be or what you need to do to be able to obtain this license.
I'd be happy to,
I mean, you need a lawyer probably to figure it out, so I'm glad they, their firm's probably glad they have
Is there one? Do they have one?
do they have one what?
an application. Yeah,
A state application?
yes.
Yeah, I mean,
They do.
the actual application for wholesalers and distributors hasn't been released yet, but I've seen it for cultivators and manufacturers. It's extensive.
But not for wholesale or distributor yet?
Right.
Okay.
It'll probably be, as far as like the background check stuff goes, that'll probably be very
So-
similar.
So let's say, again, just the description of the business sort of puts a connotation on the size, like distributor. It sounds kind of big, you know, distributor. So if I were to decide that, hey, I want to become a distributor, I'd probably get an attorney, right? Probably the first thing I would get is an attorney to help me with the application.
Yes.
And maybe if I was gonna open a store somewhere, I might wing it, you know, a little, I don't know, we're not doing stores, retail, but, I mean, retail doesn't sound as grandiose, so I may try to wing that, you know, I could see the potential possibility, and I don't advise it, of maybe not using an attorney, but they'll probably have to wind up using one to figure out all the laws, but, I mean, the assumption is that there's gonna be attorneys handling the business on the clients. Now, here's something I would like to, no, we don't have to demand that they have an attorney, right, John, to meet us?
No, that's entirely.
On the economic development?
On that point, real quick, if I can interject,
Yeah.
I think an important element of this is it's so hyper-competitive. So it
is.
really is, you know, as long as the state is, you know, applying the criteria that they've set out, which we assume that they will, I think for the cultivators, they might be giving out something like 20 additional cultivation licenses in addition to the medical ones that already exist. And there were like 500 applicants. So for one, that's going to be a lot for the state to go through. So that's, you know, this whole thing is going to take some time. But I like to believe that it's, you know, the cream of the crop are the ones, the applicants that are going to actually get the state licenses.
So,
And just
Go
one
ahead.
thing that might help with that protection. Under 7.7 for the proof of local support, that actually requires them to submit a concept plan and go through a review and demonstrate how are they going to comply with every single thing in here. That's when the application fee, because John and Scott have to review that, we have to review it for safety. It has to be reviewed with Paula and with the state police. So they have to come up with their outline and their concept plan and approach for 7.7 before we write that letter that says, we generally support this, it complies with zoning, they're addressing security, noise, odor, trash, everything else. So to me, that's when I believe that's when the $5,000 application fee would have to be submitted, because part of that will cover.
and who gets that? Who gets that 5,000?
We do.
So would it be presumptuous to think that our planner would be there and our township attorney would be there at this economic development meeting?
Right.
Who's gonna cover that fee?
That comes out of that.
Comes out of the 5,000?
Paid the
Right.
5,000.
Yeah, out of the 5,000, I mean, generally, when we can have an informal without them, and then
Yeah.
generally we collect an escrow for meeting number 2, but for these, the 5,000 would be the escrow.
Yeah, which, does that
Again-
cover the expense? I mean, I guess that's really what the fee is, to
That
cover
takes
the
care of
expense.
Scott, that just takes care of Scott, that far.
Thanks, Mayor.
But, here's the other thing that I was just curious, you know, because I'm trying to get this out. So, I've been here so long, I don't even remember. When an applicant comes in, a company, he's got to be represented by an attorney, an LLC, a corporation, comes to our planning board.
Right.
Or I know a court or whatever. So if somebody was coming in as a corporation to our Economic Development Committee meeting, would they need to be represented by an attorney?
No, the only reason that you have to have an attorney before a joint land use board or a planning board or a zoning board is because it is a quasi judicial hearing, and only attorneys can conduct, take
Hearing?
testimony, do all that stuff, yeah. So there's actually a case that Judge Haynes wrote some years ago, where somebody represented their own company. It was Craig Yates, represented Yates Industries in front of the Bordentown Planning Board, I think it was. And Martin Haynes held him to be in contempt for having engaged in the illegal practice of law.
Okay. Wow, there's a lot to consider here. And I mean, all this work is in this ordinance. I encourage the public to look at it. We had some of them here, right? But did we have some out here? Well,
What?
they're just copies of the ordinance. Well, just
You will for a public hearing.
who's ever listening, we've just touched on the
Yeah, I mean,
complication of this ordinance. It's
It is, and-
pretty,
and the fact that we're going through all this, and thank you for pointing it out, 7.7, we're going through all this, now that I understand it better, I've changed my mind. I do not think it needs to then come in front of us. The applicant does not need to come in front of us, and just, someone mentioned it before, to put their application in front of the public. I just don't think that's necessary, so I changed my mind. I agree. Not necessary. Let the economic development, they're going to come to us for approval for that after going through all these things, and then it goes to the state. If the state says, hey, you're granted for Hainesport, we've done our work already, no sense in going through over-governing, no sense in doing this again. So, yeah,
We
so I
still-
appreciate, the conversation is good for me.
But we still reserve the right to have them come before us. Let's say economic development says we really think they're good, but I'd like everybody to, we can still do
But
it.
at the beginning, though.
Right, we don't have to.
Yeah, right.
Right, I don't know about the changes.
well,
Is it-
you don't have to vote on it. You could set conditions, like John said, on your
Right.
vote. I mean, could they potentially make a decision, the committee, that two of them at a time would like to meet with the applicant themselves? I mean, what recourse do they have before they vote?
Well,
Just to make them feel comfortable.
here's the thing about that, and this is why I think that as this develops, when you get your first application, I think we're gonna have some discussions about, the devil's always in the details. To go back to what somebody just said, people will have invested a lot of money. I'm a little nervous that, there can be a subcommittee meeting, which of course is not subject to the Open Public Meetings Act, which is fine. That's why you have subcommittee meetings, right? But I'd want somebody taking minutes, because I wouldn't want, if the license was for some reason not granted, I'd want some record of what took place, wherever it is that it took place. And certainly, the Economic Development Committee is one. If the determination is made that the Township Committee should really make the call after meeting the person or the applicant, I wouldn't want that to be 2, 2, and 1, right? I'd want that to be in front of the whole committee, because there is an absolute record, and it is subject to the Open Public Meetings Act. And no one can say later on, well, 2 of the members told me I was really good to go, and 2 of them said, you got a problem here, because somebody else on the committee who you don't even know, and I'm not going to mention names, doesn't like you. Listen, I've been doing this a long time. People make up all kinds of stuff when they don't like an outcome, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's to blame but themselves.
So you think they should come?
No.
If we
Go back to
want.
what Jerry
If
said.
we want.
If the Economic Development Committee says, we're comfortable with this, but you might want to have your own feeling about it. Or Economic Development Committee says, great guns, give them an okay, give her an okay. You may say, still want to meet her. I mean, you just need to retain that, and there's nothing in here that says you can't, right?
Or
So
it could be part of our approval process.
you can make that up, again, as it goes along. There's nothing in here that says upon recommendation of the Economic Development Committee, you have to take their recommendation blindly.
Right, sure.
So you always have that right to say, okay, we appreciate that, but put it on the agenda for the next meeting, let's get a presentation.
And then, of course, then that would be in front of the public.
Yeah.
And that would be in a situation where,
It could be any situation.
Right.
Don't prejudge what
I won't, yeah,
situation it could be.
okay.
Wow.
Yeah, this is just, well, it's all new. This is just all new.
That's exactly right, and
It's
that's
just all
why you
new,
want to leave as
you
many
know?
avenues
It's not the same as
open.
liquor right now. Until it gets settled and we understand things better. I mean, I think initially, that's kind of what we talked about in our meetings, if we just do it by how things worked with liquor licenses and those types of things. It's just that it's
Going to be
now,
fluid.
it's
You're
just-
going to be learning as you go along.
Yeah.
So on 77-8C, where it says shall be granted, John, do you recommend us to leave us some options there?
I just think it should say shall be considered for approval, or shall be considered by the township.
Because if we were to not approve them after go through that process, we'd have litigation if it wasn't justified, right?
If the word granted was in there, you have no choice.
Right. So if we leave
Shall
that
be
open, we
considered.
would have to have a really justified reason to not grant it.
No,
and to go.
no, it doesn't say except for cause.
Oh, I know that, but I could see where the applicant
look,
would,
people will sue over anything, and
Right.
of course, they've invested. What I'm trying to say is, if the language says you shall grant it, you don't have a choice.
Then we don't have a
Mandatory,
choice.
right.
And if you turn it down, they're gonna sue you saying, wait a minute, I met all four of those C1, C2, C3, C4 criteria, and they turned me down. They had no authority to turn me down. Their ordinance says I shall be granted that license.
See, the only reason I brought that up is in case Ken and Jerry are on the Economic Development Committee next year, I want to have a say. No, only teasing, but I want.
Who's on the economic
I
development?
want you to feel that way. Right now, it's Leland and I, but I want everybody to feel there's interchangeability and.
No, I
there's-
agree.
And, you know, try to do unto others as you'd have done unto yourself, so.
The only thing that's missing, I think, is the part in there where the Economic Development Committee shall sample.
No. So, you know, I'm
Prior to your
I'm actually
recommendation.
feeling very confident in our, the legal advice we're getting on this and Scott's work, and I can recall, times where, you know, that we might not have been able to deal with an issue this big. So this is, we're in the right spot here,
So we're changing.
professionally to deal with something like
So
this.
we can change this then? So
On C, yeah.
77-8C, a license to operate shall be considered for approval.
Right. So
Instead of crossed out granted, considered for approval.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
We need a motion to change this?
Well,
or-
No,
Give me
you
a
haven't
second.
introduced it yet.
Give me a
Okay.
second.
It's been no motion.
Oh, that's right, I'm
introduced
sorry,
Give me
okay.
So I'm gonna ask, if there's no more questions, that we consider an ordinance to change, with the change of, to shall be considered in 77-8, paragraph C.
Or 8C, yeah.
So I'll put that motion out on the floor for,
For introduction?
I'll second that then.
or who, I'll offer this for a motion.
So I should make the
I'll
motion.
offer it for a motion.
And I'll second that.
Okay.
Mr. Montgomery?
Yes.
Mr. Klaus?
Yes.
Mr. Levinson?
Yes.
Mrs. Gilmore?
Yes.
Mayor McLaughlin?
Yes. Good job, everybody. I'm really
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks.
happy to,
Thank you.
we'll,
And I'll send you guys the scorecard thing.
Very interesting.
On the calendar, you know, an idea.
so again, living in a town like Hainesport, which I feel all of us that live here feel we're in a good place, none of us up here feel we should have sidewalks that can't be walked on. So we've all been working through the governmental challenges to start repairing our sidewalks. So we have an ordinance here. Now, it's going to appropriate the funds, as long as the estimates are under the bid threshold for a qualified purchasing agent, which we're very lucky to have Paula Koskow is. This will give her the authority to award the contract, again, as long as it's under the bid threshold. I think it's $40,000, is that?
44.
44 now. So, again, the intent here is to repair the three streets we mentioned before, and get rolling on this thing. So if anybody'd like to ask any questions on this ordinance?
I mean, I think we've went through this a lot. It's right now, again, it's the most egregious areas, mostly, the most egregious areas that have been uprooted by trees that have been planted years and years ago between the sidewalk and the street. And those areas are Craig, Sandra, and Laurel Ridge. And then further areas will be considered in the future. That's my understanding of what we.
Now, our intent is to follow this relatively quick, maybe the next meeting or two, with a sidewalk ordinance. If you get a pool put in your backyard and a dump truck drives over your sidewalk and cracks it, it's on you to fix it. It's not the municipality's
Right.
responsibility. And I was sort of made aware that we're one of the rare municipalities that don't have a sidewalk ordinance. Is that true?
Like West Hampton just passed one 8 months ago, and most municipalities have ordinances in place that clearly stipulate sidewalks are the responsibility of.
It's like snow removal and those
Plowing,
types of things
maintenance
and.
repair.
Mr. Mayor, sorry to interrupt. I'm gonna head out. I'm confident.
What? We're not done with you yet.
I'm confident John can take you the rest of the
Gotta
way.
go
here.
to,
Thank you very much. Thank you, appreciate it very much. Thanks
Thank
for
you,
your hard
Scott.
work.
May have better capacity.
Where are you working tomorrow, by the way?
We'll see you next month.
all right, thanks.
So do we need to make a motion?
Yeah, well,
for the sidewalk
we'll put this
ordinance?
out on the floor for a
Any more
motion.
discussion?
Wait, you got-
Sidewalk grant.
Oh, we still do not know the status of the $1.2 million grant. Safe streets?
Yeah,
No, we don't have the status of that yet. But
We need to
again,
get,
I
We
don't-
need to get it done.
this done.
We need to get it done.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think we should, if we have this, I mean, these are the most egregious areas, and, again, it's those special areas.
Again, this amount of money does not necessarily limit it to that. We just haven't gotten to that point yet, so.
You're gonna have money left over.
Yeah, there'll be money left over. There's some other things that Paula wanted to do. So that doesn't stop it. It's gonna keep going. It's just,
Claremont definitely needs to be
right,
done.
the other
Claremont,
streets.
Claremont is
Other
another
things.
bad one, so,
Sounds like she wants to have a party
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Who's that?
with the money.
Okay, so we're open.
So, okay, so I'd like to make a motion.
Wait, did you read it by title yet?
Do we read
Oh, do I
what?
need, okay, so I'll read it. I didn't read the other one. Hopefully, I didn't screw that up.
I think you have.
So ordinance 2022 appropriates the sum of $80,000 in funding from the general capital fund balance for sidewalks, curbs, warning surfaces, and striping on various areas throughout the township. So this is the first reading and introduction, public hearing, and we'll take comments at that time, and final adoption will be on March 8th, which is the next meeting. So with that, I'll open the floor for a motion.
I'd like to make a motion to approve.
I'll second that.
Mr. Montgomery?
Yes.
Mr. Levinson?
Yes.
Mrs. Gilmore?
Yes.
Mr. Klaus?
Yes.
Mayor McLaughlin?
Yes. So we have a variety of consent agenda resolutions. By nature, they're allowed to be grouped, and they go from 2022-35-2 all the way down to 41-2. Would somebody like to
I
make
make
a
a
motion?
motion that we approve Resolution 2022-35-2 through 2022-41-2.
I'll second that.
Mrs. Gilmore?
Yes.
Mr. Klaus?
Yes.
Mr. Levinson?
Yes.
Mr. Montgomery?
Yes.
Mayor McLaughlin?
Yes. So there's one resolution tonight, 2022-42-2, which is a little confusing to our legal counsel and our administrator, since the terms of the contract are, for lack of a better word, some ambiguity there in the contract. So we're going to pull that tonight, right?
Good. Can we comment on it or not?
Absolutely, you can
Good,
comment.
all right,
one was
well,
this?
this
Sorry.
is about the recycling, I had to, I read through that multiple times to try to make sense of it, but one thing I did get is recently I saw Broward County saying how they didn't raise taxes. They're raising your taxes through the recycling, because they've gone from a 2% cap, which I'm not sure they hit, to, they've raised it to a 2.5%
Which is
cap.
25%?
Yeah.
It's a 25%.
It's a 2.5% cap, and they're charging the full cap. So, even though your county taxes ain't going up, your municipal costs are going up because of the county. That's just something.
Yeah, but
that I-
also there was no ceiling on the amount they could increase, right?
No, I think it was a 2.5. Did they say
No,
2.5?
can I just, I'll go.
They increased the cap.
Right. So what they've done is, every year, well, the agreement with Burlington County Solid Waste is a 5-year agreement. Over the past 2 agreements, they have maintained a 2% service charge, escalation of the service charge to a maximum of 2%. So every year, the service charge goes up
It-
only 2%.
It's a max, it
Okay,
can
that's
go
the
up to
base
max.
rate.
Right.
The base rate of the tipping fee is what, so it's $80.69 this year. This was in the past to reflect the board's intent to provide municipalities with a longer-term assurance of their intent to maintain pricing structures that will aid municipal efforts to comply with the state-mandated 2% municipal spending cap. Now, apparently, they are incurring inflation concerns. They have inflation that they're dealing with. So this year, they've already assessed a 2.5% inflation rate on the service charge, which is part of the new 5-year agreement, which none of you guys have not actually signed or authorized. The next 4 years, so 2023, 24, 25, 26, they are not including a cap on that service charge.
So we have to sign
So
an agreement.
So you're signing,
An
they're
open-ended
asking you to
cost
sign an
agreement.
open-ended cost of living adjustment or inflation, which is interesting because I certainly doubt any labor negotiations that have ever been gone through in any government agency, there's a cap on the cost of living adjustment, right? You negotiate usually 1.5%, 2% on union contracts, but the county does not want to cap the service charge.
But how do we sign an agreement? I wouldn't sign an agreement to purchase anything if the cost could go up an unlimited amount that following years.
Well, that's why we pulled it.
Well-
Right. I mean,
We
we'll
don't
just have
know-
to go with a year-to-year agreement then. I don't know how else.
Well, I mean,
How else? Who would sign this?
well, I am reaching out to other municipalities to determine, I'm gonna make an assumption that that we're all on the same 5-year agreement cycle. So I'm trying to determine right now if other municipalities are aware of this. I mean, they should be. Mr. Sheehan did a great job in his cover letter explaining, that they're not able to hold the increase at the 2% because of the recent spike in inflation and the volatility in global markets. They can no longer hold that line. So I believe I provided, did I provide you guys with this solid waste type? As
Yes.
a- So to show you the increases each year, so, you know,
But-
there's a lot of different
I mean-
variables on this.
They can tie their cap into their cost. At least we have some, but right now, there's no restriction on how much
No,
they
and
raise it.
how are they supposed to expect us to budget
Right.
appropriately? How are you supposed to assess your taxpayers a certain amount for solid waste tipping fees and disposal fees when you don't know what you're gonna be charged? I don't know. In my mind, an equitable solution would be have a fixed rate, and if there's an overage, then the next year,
Open it up again.
you assess
Then
it,
justify it.
you balance that out with the other 38 municipalities, because 2 of them have their recipients.
And then it's an
They
annual
get the
contract,
tax.
of course, but that's,
But,
but
I mean,
it's
this way you have a
still,
fixed amount.
we can still have an
Well,
idea of what
if
the
they have
heck the money is.
justification to go over the cap, they should have some avenue to reopen the contract.
Or put a stipulation in it that says, we will cap it at 2.5% moving forward, and if the inflation is so much greater, then we charge that amount the next year, and you have a fixed amount that you know that you have to budget for, to offset the prior year's
Might have
Has to be
county has
something.
incurred.
Well,
Yeah.
due to inflation, a lot of your building contracts right now, people building houses, have that in there. If the cost goes up, we can reopen, as long as I can justify the cost increase, we can charge you more. So why don't they do it?
Why can't they just tie it to the consumer price index?
That'd work too?
Why can't they say 2.5% or not to exceed the consumer price index increase, whichever is, in their case, greater?
I mean, leases have been
Couldn't-
Well,
put
Which
together
may or
like
may
that
not
for
get back.
forever,
It might have to be
right?
tied to the fuel
CPI, we
increase.
didn't have one for a long time, but now all this stuff is, we
Well,
don't have
everybody has to have an
inflation.
open door, but not an unlimited open
Right.
door. That's the
We
problem.
should have something to add measure.
Right, in other words, if most of their cost is fuel, which it probably is, then it should be tied to some fuel index.
Well, they've had issues with people wanting to drive the trucks, and remember, they had issues hiring people.
Well, that was, yeah, okay.
So-
They
Well,
had
fuel
issues
is
with
gonna be
that,
their biggest
too.
cost.
Yeah, but, you know.
They just need
so
something
it's a-
to
it's a
tie.
whole
Anyway,
combination of that.
Yeah, we're gonna move on. Paul is reaching out, our administrator's reaching out to other municipalities and the county to see if this can be,
Solid waste.
put in a little bit of, more of a legal contract. So next is business licenses. We have a huge
Excuse me, Mayor,
li-
I think you do want to get a motion
Okay, we do need a motion? Okay, so I would ask for a motion to table this.
So
Motion to
moved.
table.
Second.
Mr. Levinson?
Yes.
Mr. Montgomery?
Oh, didn't,
No, go.
I thought you made the
No,
motion.
it was a simultaneous thing.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Mrs. Gilmore?
Yes.
Mr. Klaus?
Yes.
Mayor McLaughlin?
Yes. So we have a ton of business licenses. And can we group these all in,
Yes, you
John?
can.
So under item 10, business licenses, we have a big list. Then we have approval of mobile home park license, the Russlin Mobile Home Park and Goss. Then we have, under paragraph C, approval of charitable clothing bin license, Ameritex Industries, Planet Aid, and Turnkey. And D, pinball, video pinball license, Tavern and Table, and Dunleavy's. So I'd ask for a motion to approve these.
I just have a discussion item on these.
Absolutely.
Okay, on charitable clothing bins, we charge a $25 fee for a clothing bin, and we have, like, Ron Capseta has a clothing bin for, it helps a charity, and I just didn't know, is there a way we can waive that fee? I don't know what,
Well, the fee is not Copseta, it's the company that's actually, it's the business that the bin
They
owns
pay the
bin.
fee?
They pay the fee.
okay,
Not-
so
not
they're
the-
actually profiting through distribution, okay.
yes.
Okay, because I know, like Goodwill, you wouldn't want to waive a fee, but I just thought if somebody has it there, if they're paying it out of their pocket.
Yeah, so
doesn't
Turnkey
sound-
Enterprises owns the bin at the Hainesport Fire Company. I don't know about Mr. Copseta, who owns his. He's the one that made the
That's
application.
Planet Aid.
Ameritex Industry owns the one at Sacred Heart.
Planet Aid is Copsetta's.
Okay, Planet Aid, right.
Okay. I just thought if somebody's paying it for themselves for charitable reasons.
No, but they,
Right.
yeah.
a great
Some of these bins,
Well-
the host company makes money.
Okay.
It's a fundraiser.
But, you know, we need a record of what's going on in town, and it's more the record than, I think, the $25. And it costs more than $25 to create a record, where it is and who's gonna process the paperwork. So,
Yeah.
you know, it's all about having a record of where things are,
Sure,
and I think that's reasonable to ask for that. We just have to know where things are, so.
That goes all the way back to the application fee, and right? Is that
Costs-
covering the expense,
Costs
right?
money,
It goes
yeah.
back to
Yeah, it
all-
actually costs a lot
Good
more than
point.
$25 to handle these licenses. It's de minimis, but again, there's got to be, it's just the way things have to be set up. So I'll offer, I'll ask for a motion on the approval of these business licenses and en masse.
So moved.
Second?
I'll second.
Okay.
Mr. Klaus?
Yes.
Mr. Levinson?
Yes.
Mrs. Gilmore?
Yes.
Mr. Montgomery?
Yes.
Mayor McLaughlin?
Yes. So,
Good questions. Good questions.
I'm going to ask, just again, I always like to try to explain, maybe too much, I hope not, what we're doing up here to the public. So Scott, I'm going to hand this one off to you. This is the Joint Land Use Board 2021 report. Am I hitting you
Yeah.
on the side of the head? Who wants to take it? Well, just explain what it is, or if somebody would help.
The statute requires the planning board, in this case the Joint Land Use Board, annually report to the Township Committee on its activities in the prior year. It can include, if it wants to, recommendations for changes to the zoning ordinances. This report simply tells you, these are the applications that were received in 2021. This is what they involved, this was the nature of the application, and this was the outcome.
So there's a list here of projects that the planning board voted on, and if I'm not mistaken, we also look at the repetitiveness of some of the applications, and possibly eliminating the need to come before the planning board for some of these repetitive, and it's almost by neighborhood, I think. We had some fence.
That I actually can comment on.
Okay.
Thank you, John, for covering. I wasn't sure if that was about the annual report or the reexamination report. So, as we mentioned earlier, we are in the process of doing the master plan reexamination report. Michelle, my wife, and the president of the dozens of zoning issues and housekeeping items and recommendations of that will be reflected in that examination report. So those recommendations for potential rezoning. We know we have coverage issues in some zones with swimming pools.
Right.
We know we have corner lot, front yard fencing issues that the board routinely approves. So we're going to try to do some housekeeping.
Yeah.
And clean up what's up there.
Big ones, Franklin Estates with swimming pools was one that we were trying to keep the public from having to come in and post bonds and being, intimidated by a hearing on some of these things. So we take this is what we do, we take a look at it, so. Do we need to receive and file that?
Yeah.
Make a motion to receive and file it?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Okay. Your vote, please?
Mrs. Gilmore?
Yes.
Was that you? Mr. Klaus?
Yes.
Mr. Levinson?
Yes.
Mr. Montgomery?
Yes.
Mayor McLaughlin?
Yes. So we're going to open the meeting to comments from the public. On
Can I speak again, please?
Absolutely. Name and address for the record.
Here at 63 Barry Drive. I'd just like to make a suggestion, with all due respect, that in the future the mayor ask a caller whether there is an online audience before he starts disparaging the fact that there is no audience. I feel that we don't disparage you guys when you call in, and in fact, I believe in the past, I've praised committee members for calling in from vacations. So I think you ought to give your township folk the same courtesy in the future. Thanks.
Anybody else? That means there's nobody else online
No, they're not.
that wants to make a comment, which is what I announced the first time. So
They're not
with that,
unmuted.
we'll end public comment. All right. Comments from our administrator.
So I just wanted to let the committee know that we were invited by the administrator of Lumberton to collaborate in a water quality restoration grant. NJDEP recently announced that they're making available $9.4 million for water quality restoration. So our Hainesport is one of 17 entities, I believe, that they've opened this up to, and it's to develop a watershed protection plan for impaired waterways, including the Rancocas Creek, to identify pollutants, their sources, propose mitigation strategies, and eliminate pollution sources. So I do have a letter of support here, and I just wanted to make sure that the governing body was aware of this opportunity and are okay with the municipality collaborating with, and actually Rutgers is going to be the entity that's going to write and submit to DEP the grant to develop a watershed protection plan, and they would actually also administer the grant if awarded, and obviously this is to help with the Rancocas Creek. And I know, Committeeman Klaus, you were a few years ago part of a consortium of mayors along the Rancocas, and I think it kind of goes along with that effort. So, if I can just get authorization for the mayor to sign the letter of support, that would be great, and I can forward it to you as well if you want to see it.
Do we need to do anything? We don't have to vote?
Hey, I'm all for clean water. That's kind of sounds
Right.
kind of easy to me.
The Rancocas.
And it's nice, it can also extend to stormwater management, non-source pollution identification, so it extends beyond the watershed, the plan.
Would we be sharing in the cost of application for this grant, or would we be in discussion first?
There would be no, the grant would cover
Oh,
all of the costs.
Okay.
And Rutgers would administer the program.
I know that Bruce Levinson, canoes the Rancocas quite often and has talked about this many times. So, you probably know it, well, not probably, you know it better than most of us out there, so.
Well, I was not
I'm
aware.
interested in your thought on this.
Sure. Well, I'm not aware of what's taking place here with regard to the mayors between Lumberton and of course us, but if this is heading in that direction, then I'm naturally all for it. I know that the Rancocas, we're trying to get a national waterway recognition for the Rancocas Creek, and in doing so, that's going to help townships provide access to the waterway to their residents and also improve the banks along the waterway. And this would be a 20-mile stretch, basically, a uninterrupted waterway going from the Delaware River inland. It will eventually provide funding for a lot of improvements along the Rancocas. Again, maybe some ramps and things of that nature, docks, or maybe even an improvement in some of our parks that are bumped up against the waterway. So I appreciate, Ken, you mentioning that, and there's a lot of history as well, I think, that we can incorporate into this. Again, I thank you very much, and again, I'm on board with it, and if there's anything that I can do to assist that, I'm here.
Well, I believe that if we were to receive funding, which it sounds like there's a good chance that we will, every entity will be asked to have a representative.
There you go, yeah. And, and you talk about historic, Hainesport, look at that boat, that paddle boat, that steamboat on our logo. Where is it? We don't have it here showing here, do we? So, there you go.
and
Here's the history.
I've been here almost 30 years, and we spent many, many days out on the Rancocas. And I made sure that whenever anybody visited me from out of town, any friends I grew up with, I took them out there, because that is absolutely one of the best-kept secrets of this area. You could get out there and you think you could be in Louisiana, you could be in Florida on a summer day. You can't tell where you're at. It's so beautiful back there. And again, we spent many.
I never got that invitation,
Oh.
Bruce, when I came.
I don't have a boat. I don't have a boat anymore.
I gotta take the Bruces up on
No
some of
boat,
this
no
here.
boat.
I extended an invitation way back. Anybody that wants to go,
Okay.
just give me a call.
you can
I'll be
do
happy
it
to
in
take it. Got
kayaks.
extra kayaks, yep.
Yeah.
All you got to do is look at the tide chart. If you get in the water 2 hours for the tide change, you paddle very easily with the tide. The tide changes, you come back. So it's a little 4-hour trip with little effort.
And Bruce is absolutely right. When you sit there, you feel like you're in the middle of nowhere.
And who's going to help?
I have 3 kayaks.
Oh, we'll help you out. Oh, there's no problem.
One-
And as far as getting
one-
wet, sometimes
One of
that
the
happens too.
diseases a
It's
boater
good thing.
gets is he keeps getting a bigger boat, and finally, my boat wouldn't go back there anymore, and that was the
It
most
will now.
fun. That was the most fun boat I ever had, when I had a junkie boat, and I kept, had that disease, and
Yeah.
It wouldn't go back there.
Donzi isn't gonna go there.
yeah, well, it was a little bigger than that, but nevertheless, but, again, that's a really good thing that we have going for us, that,
So just so you know, the Rancocas is one of the cleaner creeks/rivers. I call it more of a river. I hate to call it a creek because it doesn't really give it a nice connotation. But it's one of the nicer, one of the more clean rivers that we have in South Jersey.
Really?
Not only that, the animals that you'll see absolutely, a bunch of deer, you'll see fox, you'll see turtle.
Snapping turtles?
I've seen beaver, you see snapping turtles. You see bald eagles, all kinds of birds. So there's a lot of things to see, and the fishing's good.
And what, sorry?
The fishing is
Oh,
good,
the fishing.
yeah.
You eating any of that fish there?
No, I don't think so.
Well, it's funny. You don't eat it, but I ate it as a kid when it was a lot more dirtier. It was. When it was more polluted.
That explains a lot, Jerry. That explains a lot.
But everybody ate fish out of the
Oh,
creek.
kidding.
And all of a sudden, we became more aware of pollution and chemicals, and nobody eats it, but it's so much cleaner now.
It's clean, yeah.
It really is.
Interesting. That's
You know?
a history lesson here at
Yeah.
Hainesport Township
no,
Committee meeting.
it's not discussed enough, and it's not recognized enough.
Glad you guys brought it up. Very
And
good.
it's more accessible now with larger boats since they took the bridge down. Once they took the bridge down, right by the Turnpike Bridge,
Oh,
the
yes,
small one.
yes.
Now it is, before you couldn't get
Interesting.
anything
Right.
with a cabin there. Now you can bring a cabin.
By the
boat.
old, where the Pirates Inn
Yep.
used to be, right? That's,
Look,
yeah.
lucky we got a female up here on the committee, because as you were saying, Paula,
What was she
Going
talking
back-
about?
Right, we kind of got off track here.
kinda-
You were talking
kinda
about
got
the
reminded
watershed
that we
agreement with
kinda-
Lumberton.
And
You all digress.
And we wanted,
Okay.
you wanted,
Thank you, Leela, for bringing it up.
yeah.
Final thing, we are going to be starting construction on the new playground this month.
All right, very good.
Great.
Can't wait to use it.
Me
What-
too.
Once you push the passion button, it's just hard to contain. So
Yes.
some of us are passionate about that, so I apologize.
That is all I have. Thank you so much.
All right,
Thanks, Paul, good job
All
by
right,
you.
thank you.
okay. Comments from our solicitor.
I ceded my time to Paul.
Me?
I'm good, thanks.
Okay, starting, go with ladies first tonight on the committee. Comments?
Oh, I'd like to thank everybody for coming.
Online?
Online.
Well,
Online,
there's
yeah.
people online, and
Coming or
others watch
listening.
the videos. They do tune in and watch the videos. But no, we did have our guests tonight, the Scott and Scott, that
Yes.
helped to explain everything. And also to remind everybody that this Saturday is the time to drop off your donation shoeboxes for the Heart to Give shoebox collection program for the homeless. It's at the Street Center between 10 and 12. Remind everybody that the senior citizens are meeting the second and fourth Thursdays of the month, every month, at noon at the Street Community Center, and story time at the Community Center. This Friday, the 18th, it's for 2.5 to 5-year-olds from 10 to 11 a.m. They tell stories and do crafts with the children. It's with a lot of retired teachers, and they do a great job with the kids.
And former Hainesport Elementary School students who are now in college.
Correct.
My
It's a
daughter
new-
McKenna was
it's a new
reading.
volunteer.
Went to read last time, yes.
Correct. And I also want to, once again, thank Dr. Elizabeth Forbes for continuing to work with the Mayor's Wellness Campaign, and is actively working on the June 4th Community Wellness Day. And thank everybody for such an enjoyable evening.
Mr. Levinson?
I think I commented already.
Ken?
I'm happy the cannabis is moving forward, I'm happy the sidewalks are moving forward, and thanks for all the help.
I'm happy everything's moving forward. I appreciate all the help on the sidewalks. Everything is great. I do want to let you know this weekend on the 12th and 13th, the Firehouse is selling roses. Roses is a fundraiser. So if you don't have nothing to do, the 13th just happens to be Super Bowl, go get some roses. But no, it's a good fundraiser that would support our fire department. Other than that, everybody, I think the groundhog's wrong. We're in for early spring. Thank you all.
At least this week.
And
12, 10.
I hope I'll get the hang of it again as we go through the year. I do try to run the meeting where we inform the public as much as possible without getting overboring or overzealous about the ordinances and how government works. One of the reasons that I've stayed here all these years, you know, I want to help the township as much as I possibly can, but I really enjoy watching government work and how the ordinances happen, and dealing with this. The cannabis thing is probably one of the more complex situations that have come our way, and how our committee people, our Jerry and Ken and our professionals and our administrator got together and are working this out. And as our solicitor, Mr. Gillespie, said, this is going to, you know, wind its way left or right as we go through the process. But it's I think it's in pretty good hands with the people that represent Hainesport Township at this point. So I'd like to thank everybody for that. And with that, I'd like to open up a motion to pay our bills.
Motion to pay our bills?
I'll second.
Yep, second it. Yep.
Mr. Levinson? Mr. Levinson?
Yes.
Mrs. Gilmore?
Yes.
Mr. Klaus?
Yes.
Mr. Montgomery?
Yes.
Mayor McLaughlin?
Yes. So we do have a resolution to enter into executive session for the purpose of personnel and potential litigation.
And pending litigation.
And pending litigation, do we expect any formal action?
Just direction to Paula and to me? No
Nothing.
resolutions,
we-
no ordinances, no.
So the audience doesn't necessarily have to wait because
I mean, if they want to,
They can
but
stay.
we're gonna probably stay in here, disconnect this, and they'll have to come back in, but there will not be formal action taken.
So there will not.
Thanks, Troop.
Thank you.
Thank you, officer.
Thank you.
Will they
There will
fit
be
in the
no
hallway?
formal
Will there be
governmental
enough
action
room in the
on
hallway for the
the,
audience?
excuse me?
Yes, plenty of room.
Over you.
Yeah, that's okay.
Should we amend the agenda to include?
Okay, do we need a
Yeah, so there's
motion
three-
to?
So
in your
let me
resolution, there's
just,
three-
because you have to, kind of have to get this out there. We
So-
do not expect any formal action to be taken from our executive session tonight. So can we,
I make a motion that Resolution 2022-43-2 to enter into executive session.
I second that.
Mrs. Gilmore?
Yes.
Mr. Levinson?
Yes.
Mr. Klaus?
Yes.
Mr. Montgomery?
Yes.
Mayor McLaughlin?
yes. Okay, so we shut the speakers off, right?
Want to shut this off, Paul?
Bye.
Good night.
Bye.
Good night.
Paul,
Uh,
shut this?
yes.